Hi there. Now we know enough HTML elements to start adding HTML to our very first project, which is a website for our bootcamp. And before we get into writing the code, let's take a look at what we are building. So this is how the website should look like, and we have got a header over here which contains a logo and a nav bar, and then we have a hero session with a hero image and some text. Down here we had three images and some description. Then we have a heading and a paragraph and a form, and then we have another heading and an embedded video. And at the end we have our footer. So let's implement one by one. In this video we'll be looking only at the HTML part. Later, after studying CSS and JavaScript, we can build it exactly like this. Now, in the text editor, let's start building the web page. Create an index.html file. Get the boilerplate code. Change the title to Web Development Bootcamp. Let's open the file in the browser. So, copy the path and paste it in the browser. Let's open up what we are building in the next tab. So, inside the body, what we need first is this heading session, which contains this logo and this navbar. So let's create that. Let's add a header, and inside the header we can have a div for the logo and a nav for the navbar. Here the logo is just a text like this. We are not having a logo as such, but we are using a text here. So let's add it. GCK. Let's hit save and refresh. Yes, we have got some text over here, and inside the nav we are going to create the nav bar. So there are basically four navigation links. Let's create that. So inside the nav I'm going to create unordered list. So inside the unordered list, let's create the list items which are home, about, service and contact. Let's create it. So let's check it, save and refresh. Yeah, here we have got some unordered list. What we need now is when we click any of these text, we need to jump to the respective page. Like if I hit home, I need to go to the index page. If I click about, I need to go to about. If I click on services, I need to go to the service page and so on. So for that, let's use the anchor tag and wrap the text inside the anchor tag. Now let's add the href attribute. So the href for the home page is going to be the index.html because this is the home page, and the href for about page and the href for the about page is going to be just a hash value because at the moment we are not creating the about page and service page or the contact page. We are just focusing on the home page. So let's give the link URL as just a hash value. Let's hit save and refresh. Yes, perfect. We can see that these unordered list items turned into a link. What we want next is a hero session with some text in it and an image. So let's add that. Here here the header session is over. So let's create another session. So using sessions will give a little more clarity to your website, and we can give this session an ID which is going to be the hero session, and inside this session we we need to have a text. We need to have two text and an image. So the image will be done along with the css, and we can set the image as background, which is done using the css. For now, let's add the text. Inside this session, let's use a div to wrap our text, and let's use an h1 and let's use an h1 for the heading. The heading is going to be web development bootcamp. Let's save and refresh. Okay, but here we can see that the bootcamp is in a separate line, isn't it? So let's have a line break, which is a br tag. Save and refresh. Perfect. The bootcamp came into a new line. So the next thing we want is an image and some description about it. So let's add that. Let's create a separate folder for the images. I'm going to name it img, and I have already downloaded some images. Let's copy it and move it to the images folder. Now we have got three images, one for CSS, one for HTML, and the other for JavaScript. So let's add them to our website. Let's create another session and going to give it a session ID, which is like images. And inside this session, we need three boxes. We need three elements, one for HTML, one for CSS, and one for JavaScript. So let's add three divs. So inside each div, we need an image, a heading, and a description, which is a paragraph. So now let's add that. Inside the first div, I'm going to create the image and text of HTML. So let's add an image tag. and let's give the source, and the source is going to be the inside the image folder and the html.png. So this is the source. Let's add an alternate text and name it html image. The next thing we need is the heading which says html. So let's add that. We can use an h3 and type in html. The third thing we need is a description, which is a paragraph with some demi text. Let's add that too. Okay, perfect. Let's save and refresh. Yes, we have got the HTML. Now we need to do the same for CSS and JavaScript. So let's copy it up and paste it inside the second and third div. Let's change the image name to css.png and the heading to CSS. And for JavaScript, let's change the name to js.png and the heading to JS. We we also need to change the alternate text. Let's hit save and refresh. Yes, perfect. But the size of the HTML image is too big. So let's reduce its size. I'm going to give a height of say 200 and a width of maybe 200. Let's check it. Yes, perfect. Now we have got three images and their heading and their paragraph. So we are done with that session. The next the next session we need is a heading and a paragraph and a form down here. So let's first create this heading and a paragraph. Let's create the next session and I'm going to give it an ID of say something like slogan. Inside this session we have two things, which is a heading and a paragraph. So at first let's wrap them inside the div. The first thing is the heading. So the heading is hurry up and experience the journey with us. Let's type it. And down here we have a paragraph with some demi text. Let's save it and refresh. Yes, we have got the heading and the paragraph. So the next thing that we need is a registration form. So let's create that. Let's create the next session and give it an ID of say forms. Inside this forms we have a heading called register here. Let's create that. After the heading, let's create the form. Let's use a div to contain all the forms. And inside this div, let's create the form element. Inside the form, we need three input elements and a submit button. Let's create separate divs for each of them. This is one div, and let's copy paste to make it 4. So inside the first div, let's give a label of name and an input with type as text. In the second div, we can give a label of email with the input type as email. So inside the third div, let's give a label of batch. So let's change the input type to something like select. And inside the select, let's give the options which are available. So the first one may be 2K20, and let's copy paste the options 4 times. And change the year. Inside the fourth div, let's create the submit button, which is simply an input type with which is simply an input with type as submit. Let's hit save and refresh. Yes, we have got a form here where we can type our name and an email, and we can select the year, and we have the submit button. So the next thing we need is again a text, a heading which says learn, explore and create. So let's create that. Down here, let's create another session and give it an ID of say video. Let's add this text first. So let's use an H2 for that. Learn, explore and create. Let's save it and refresh. Yes, we have got the text. So the next thing we need is to embed this video. So let's go to its source. So this was the video which we have embedded. So copy embedded code and back in the text editor, paste it after the heading. Let's change the height and width to say something like 600 and height may be 400. Let's save and refresh. Yes, perfect. We have got our video embedded. So the next thing we need is a footer like this. So let's add that. Let's create a footer. Inside the footer, let's use a paragraph for this sentence. which says for further information email at, and then we can see this is a kind of a link. So let's use an anchor tag. Let's add the text at abc at xyz.com. This is just a dummy email, and the href here is I'm not providing any real URL. So let's give a hash and then copyright. You can see a symbol here, which is the symbol for copyright. So to create that, let's use ampersand and the word copy with a semicolon, which will create that symbol. And let's give a year. So that's it. That's about the photo. Let's save it and refresh. Yes, we have got the footer here. You can see that the copyright symbol has turned off. So that's all about my part. We have created the HTML session of this beautiful website. So please don't be upset seeing this weird kind of website. When adding CSS and JavaScript, it will look as beautiful as this page. So that's all about HTML. Hope you have enjoyed this session and thank you for listening to me.